This is like Horns 2 twist, basically. So I'm going to put the big up here because a lot of times they will run it. And this could be Cornette with the backups. It could be Horford, but I'm going to put KP here.
Yep.
So Derrick White will come off JB. JB will then cut through. And sometimes he'll space. Sometimes he just kind of stays in the dunker. And then KP comes and runs into a ball screen. And the thing with KP that's interesting in particular about this series, so now you got Derrick White going to his strong hand, one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in terms of efficiency this year, according to Second Spectrum. And you got KP popping. And this is against, by the way, this is against Daniel Gafford. It's against Derek Lively, right?
Yep.
This, to me, is probably the biggest question mark I have about two great defenses. I think Dallas and Minnesota have two great defenses. So how do you anticipate them dealing with the Porzingis pick and rolls?
You know, that's going to be a big-time challenge. And obviously, personnel-wise, you see who's on the floor. But at the end of the day, if Porzingis is active, then 9 times out of 10, they're going to have 5 shooters out on the floor. So you can't, you know how, you know, in the OKC series, Dallas was allowed to hide Gafford at times and Lively and put him on Josh Giddey, you know, and kind of keep them roaming, you know, not afraid of his pick and pops, not afraid of him being spaced in the corner. So he was able to get away with it to the point where OKC made a change and started, decided to put Josh Giddey off the bench. So that will be the biggest question mark, JJ, on who guards Porzingis. Obviously, I believe it will be Gafford and or Lively, but how do they deal with that Horns twist action? Or how do they deal with just a thumb down or a thumb up action where Porzingis just runs up from the middle of the floor and probably doesn't even set it all the time and gives those guys a right hand where he's popping, and you putting, you know, X5 Lively, Lively, Gafford, in a pickle, in a position where it's like, okay, do I help on the guard or do I allow him to get downhill? So I think what helps in Dallas' case, if that is the case, having Maxi Kleber back. I think that helps a lot. I know he's been out for a while since round 1 versus the Clippers, but it does allow them to now start switching a lot, you know, and I know that's always challenging against Boston because they have so many great ISO players, but I do think there's times in certain matchups where Maxi can switch out on some of the Boston guards and contain them.
Yeah, he's a very valuable defender. At the very least, he can stay in front and use his length, right?
Correct.
At the very least. It's interesting because today I watched a pretty long edit of all of Anthony Edwards' ISOs against the Dallas Mavericks. And it's interesting because you brought up the roaming thing off of Giddey. And to me, for the most part, in these ISOs, they're kind of just ignoring Gobert. And whoever is on Gobert, whether it's Lively, Gafford, Kleber, they are essentially roaming. And they're just essentially banking on the fact that they got multiple guys behind them, right? And they're going to play rotation, X game out of that. You just can't really do that against the Boston Celtics. And there was one clip where, you know, Anthony Edwards had it up top and he was playing in a 5-shooter lineup. It was McDaniels, it was Naz Reid, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mike Conley, right? He got past his man. Gafford was forced to help. McDaniels gets a slot 3.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's like point of attack defense versus the Celtics ISOs, and then being great in rotation. But again, this is what you said at the beginning. Like, they are so good once they get into the pass game, once they get you into rotation, that's, to me, is when they're at their best. And that's really going to be the biggest issue, I think, against Dallas, is there isn't somebody to roam off of.
No, nobody. There's not one person you can roam off of that that Boston puts out on the floor. They are well equipped. They know exactly where everybody is. You know, to go back on what you just said on the Minnesota piece, you know, there's times offensively with Minnesota when Gobert is on the floor, you don't quite feel like he knows where to be successful when they're roaming off of him, or the team doesn't know. there was a big-time play in Game 4. Karl Anthony Towns was at the 4, and essentially Kyle Anderson was playing the 5. And, there was a play where Anthony Edwards was isoed on the right wing, and no one was guarding Kyle Anderson. And Kyle Anderson, we know, is one of the smartest guys in the NBA. He used what they were doing against him to the benefit for Cat and was able to set a flare screen opposite the ball onto Kyrie and got Cat a big-time 3. I mean, up until that point, I think Cat made 1 before that, but up until that point, through the first 3.5, three games and 3 quarters, Cat had 0 airspace. But going back to what I'm saying, Kyle Anderson just used his brain and saying, okay, yes, you guys are going to shit on me because I am not a spacer. And me playing the dunker doesn't benefit because I'm not super athletic. I can't catch lobs. But you know what? I know there's a guy not guarding me, so I know that if I'm setting a screen on someone, then my guy can help him. And that was a big time shot. They went up 6, forced Dallas to call a timeout. So, you have to be able to play the game within the game.
We want to celebrate, and I think we're being very positive with the Celtics right now. We're not trying to make it seem like they're unguardable.
I know Laker Nation is going for the Dallas Laker Mavericks.
Yeah. Look, but I do want to make a point, and I don't think Minnesota has been very clean with their spacing. Your point about Gobert is a valid point. I don't think they're clean with even simple stuff like a slot ISO. Mm-hmm. I'm watching this stuff. A slot ISO, you typically have the ball side player all the way in the corner. Mm-hmm. A top ISO, or even just a shade left or right of the top, you typically have the next man spaced to the 4-point line 45 degrees. Their spacing is very dense. Their spacing is very condensed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the guy doesn't get all the way to the corner. Sometimes the next man is like 8 feet away when he's got the space to move. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you're like, oh, Anthony Edwards, you turn the ball over. I think it was Game 2 where he just didn't drive the basketball. And you're like, where's he supposed to go?
Yeah, there's 8 guys. There's 8 guys and 16 eyes right there. Yeah.
And my curiosity about the way Dallas has played against these ISOs, because again, Boston, I want to say, was the 4th most frequent ISO team in the regular season. JB, Tatum, large part of that, to your point. Mm-hmm. They have been, even against shooters, whether it's Mike Conley, Jaden McDaniels, Isaiah Joe at times, Cason Wallace at times, even against shooters, they've been more than willing. I don't want to call it overhelp, but overshow help position against isolation.
Yeah.
Like they are, and then just rely on the closeout. And I don't know if they do that against Boston, but that's something that I'm very curious about in terms of how they have their shifts against isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because we know that on any given day, any given evening, that Boston can ring off 25 made threes. And that is very frustrating for a defense. Where, as a player, we go into a game and you're like, okay, we want to be heavy shift. We want to create no lanes for these 2 guys, but we're giving up 60 attempts from the 3-point line, in which case they can make 25 of them. So I have a lot of confidence, that J Kidd and his staff, being able to work with those guys for some years, that they will have a game plan that's similar to what they've been doing, obviously, because you get, when you get to this point of the postseason, you can't just tear everything up and throw it away and say, oh, hey, we got a new thing for them. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You've built these habits all throughout the year and across the postseason, but they will have some things that will be different from what they've done, versus Minnesota, versus OKC, versus the Clippers, once they face Boston, because it's a different beast. It's a different monster. We know that.
Yeah, and the other thing I would just say is whether it's P.J. Washington, whether it's Derrick Jones Jr., those two matchups against JB and Jayson Tatum, look, those guys can stay in front at times. It's not like they're getting beat every time. Mm-hmm. And I would say Kyrie's engagement level defensively, let's say there is a switch on an ISO, and you've got P.J. Washington with length, Derrick Jones Jr. with length in a shift, that stuff matters. Like they are equipped. They are equipped to defend this Boston team. I believe that.
I agree.
But this Boston team is a different animal offensively than anything they've faced so far, and it's because of the spacing and the shooting. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching Mind the Game podcast. If you like it, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you.